Unk Uja Seneb, Life, Health, and Vitality, Hotepu. This is Menka'u Shakim Ra, and today we're going to be doing a special series for Black History Month, and it's basically called the Afterlife Cloning Experiment. And as you can see by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about DNA and some of the surprises that we will find when we actually look at what DNA really is. So, this will be a series that I'll do probably once a day for the next 12 days or so, because there are 12 hours to the Sesh Am Duat. The number 12 will come up quite frequently. So, essentially, what we're going to be talking about today is an overview of the connection between human DNA and the stars. So you can see here, I have a couple studies that I've looked up, and I'll drop the link to these studies as well. But a new study was done that basically mapped all the elements of 150,000 stars. And basically, 97% of a similarity was found between human DNA and stars. So we are literally made of the stars. We are made of stardust. And we'll also talk about the astral alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet just a little bit, because this proves that this knowledge was known thousands and thousands of years ago. And also, as an aside, stars born together have almost identical DNA and composition on a chemical atomic level. So, with all of that being said, we're going to jump right into hour one of the Duat. And then after that, I'll do a short lecture and breakdown of basically what it's about. So let's stop sharing that. Let's make this full screen and let's go to hour one. The Sesh Am Duat, the book of what is in the netherworld. From the tombs of Ramesses VI and Seti I. This audio presentation is read and voiced by Shakim Ra. It is provided to the public by Amen University. Hour one, Net Ra. The name of this field is Ma'ati. This god arrives in the Sektet boat. He makes a way through the court of this city, which is 220 measures in length, which he traveleth through to Ernest. He passes through the water, which is 300 measures in extent, and he bestows the fields upon the gods who follow him. Net Ra is the name of this field. Ar-Nebui is the name of the guardian of this field. This gods begin to declare in this region the words which perform the destinies of those who are in the Duat. Now, notice he says he proclaims the names of the gods who perform the duties of what is to be done in the netherworld. So immediately, one is reminded of what we hear in the Gospels, right? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This is a concept that existed in the Sesh Am Duat. Let's continue. The god cometh to this court. He passes through it in the form of a ram, and he makes his transformations therein. After he has passed through this court, the dead who are in his following do not go with him, but they remain in this court, and he speaks words unto the gods who are therein. If copies of these things be made according to the ordinances of the hidden house, and after the manner of that which is ordered in the hidden house, they shall act as protection to the man who makes them. There are 9 apes, the gods who open the gates to the great soul, the 12 beings, the goddesses who unfold the portals in the earth. So there's 12 goddesses that unfold the portals in the earth. So there are portals in the earth cell. So the earth essentially on a quantum level, if you shrink the earth down to the size of a cell, the earth would have holes in the cell poles. At the North Pole is where the poles are the weakest. And that corresponds to the aurora lights. Let's continue. There are 9 seated gods, who are the gods who praise Ra. 12 divine beings in the form of women, who are the goddesses who guide the great god. In the lower register are 9 seated apes, 12 serpents who throw fire forth from their mouths, and are those who make light the darkness in the duat. 9 man-headed gods with hands raised in adoration, the gods who praise Ra, the lord of the company of the god. 12 goddesses with their arms hanging by their sides, who are those who give praises to Ra as he passeth over Uranus. The sun god addresses the gods in the first division of the duat, saying, "Open ye to me your doors, and let me come into your courts. Give ye light unto me, and make yourselves guides to me. O you who came into being from my members, my word has gone forth to you. You are made of my bodies. I have made you, having fashioned you of my soul. I have created you. I have made you by means of my enchantments, and I have come to avenge myself the blood of my members, which have risen up against me, and I will bring to destruction that which has been made forward. I will make perfect my forms, Osiris Kinti-Amenti. Open to me the doors with your hands, O you apes. Unfold to me the portals of the courts, O you apes, and welcome the gods and goddesses who have come into being for my divine souls. Come you into being. You came into being for Khepera. O you who have your being at the head of the duat, stand you up in Uranus and establish you yourselves on the secret banks thereof, and work ye for the gods of the duat in the court which you guard." Now, this image is powerful because in this image, you see the dead Neter on a serpent flying to the sky, right? So this is a protein, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So essentially, the gods and goddesses are atoms and molecules and proteins. But if you read, let's say, a modern translation of the Sesh Am Duat, you're not going to get any science or anything about quantum physics in the translation, because it was translated at a time where we didn't have a lot of knowledge about the quantum world. So just in the last 100 years, so much has changed. But let's continue. May you possess your plans and your seats in your domains and in your fields. Then the gods of this court said to Ra, "O great God, the doors are open to you, and the portals of the secret Amenta are thrown open before thee." Now, doesn't this remind one of the Emerald Tablets? He says the secret portals of Amenti are open to you. Now, these are the gods and goddesses, the Neteru, responding to the sun god Ra after he commanded them to open their gates. So let's listen to that one more time, because that was key. That's something I want to highlight for this particular introduction. For the gods of the duat in the court which you guard. May you possess your plans and your seats in your domains and in your fields. Then the gods of this court said to Ra, "O great God, the doors are open to you, and the portals of the secret Amenta are thrown open before thee. The doors of Nut the Great are thrown wide open. Illumine you the darkness of the night. Provide for that which is in the place of destruction. And approach thou in your name of Ra at the entrance to the doors of the earth. Praise be to you, and make thou perfect delight, and enter thou in through the habitations of the great country. The apes, Abenti, open the doors to thee. The Ahetetu unfold to you the portals. The serpents sing and exalt you, and the divine serpents lighten thy darkness for you. O Ra, the goddess of the hour comes to you. The two soul goddesses tow you along in your form, and you take up your position on the ground of the field of this land. You have taken possession of the night, and you will bring in the day, and you do likewise make long the hours, and your boat comes to rest. You seize the grain of the god Hanbet in your secret place of Net. You open Net Ra. You uncovers the god Sheba. The Uraeus goddesses, the Necharit of Ernest, acclaim you. The Uraeus goddesses ascribe praise to you. Your word is Ma'at against your enemy. You give tribulations to those who are condemned. The majesty of this God uttereth words after he came forth into this court. He does battle at the fortifications thereof. The doors of this court are strong, saying, Shut your doors by your bolts. Come ye to me, advance ye to me, make ye your way to me, and ye shall abide in your place. Take your stand on the banks of the stream of Ernest. This great God passes by, and they wail when he has gone by them in the field of Ernest. The goddess of the hour, who guides this great God as they wail through this court, is Ushem Hatkefetiu Nu Ra. Those who are in this picture praise this great God after he has come forth to them, and behold, it is their words which lead him to them. They lament when he passes onwards, having spoken words to them. Behold, these gods are they who make the words of those who are upon earth to reach the God, and it is they who make souls to approach their forms. It is they who make souls to approach their forms. Wow. So it's really breaking down what happens on a quantum level. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's all about words, and words is basically a reference to DNA transcription, right? Remember we talked about the scribes of the gods in a previous video and the tradition of the immortal scribe. So essentially, Ramesses VI or Seti I has become immortalized through the power of the word. Their work consists in causing the coming into being the offerings of the night and in performing the overthrow of enemies at their hour. It is they who guard the day and who bring on the night until this great God comes forth out of the thick darkness to repose in this court of the eastern horizon of heaven. They cry out in lamentation to this great God, and they utter wailings for him after he has passed by them. Those who know them shall come forth by day, and he shall be able to journey during the night to the divisions of the great double city. The great double city. The great double city. Notice that the first hour we had the double goddesses, Ma'ati, the two goddesses, Isis and Nephthys, are present in the first hour of the Amduat, and this points to lactose metabolism. And then we are also now traveling to the great doors of the double city. The lower register says, Those who are in this picture give unto this great God the seasons and the years which are in their hands. When this great God has made speech with them, and they have life through the voice of this great God, and their throats draw in breath, for when he cries to them, he orders them to do what they are to do, and he appoints to them green herbs in abundance in their field, and they supply with the green herbs of Ernest the gods who are in the following of Ra, and they make offerings of water to the spirits by the command of this great God, and they kindle flames of fire in order to burn up the enemies of Ra, and there is wailing to them, and they lament after this great God has passed them by. Nebui is the guardian of this field. Whosoever knows this is in the condition of a spirit equipped with words of power, and the gods protect him. So whosoever knows this is in the form of an equipped spirit with words of power, Hekau. All right. So again, everything about this book, the Sesh Am Duat, even from the first chapter, was always pointing to the power of the word, the WORD. The gods of the Duat spoke to this great God as he entered in with understanding to the boundary, and he is born over Netra into earnest, saying, Hail those who rises as a mighty soul, who has received the things which belong to the Duat. The guardian of heaven lives in Tater Sert. Come thou and cast thou thine eye in thy name of the living one Kepera at the head of the Duat. Traverse thou this field, O thou who hast might. Bound thou with fetters the Ha'u serpent, and smite thou the serpent Neharhera. There is rejoicing in heaven, and there are shouts of gladness upon the earth at the entrance of thy body. He who shines sends forth light, and the Uru gods give light at dawn. The darkness which is in Amenta, in thy name of Seker Sheta'u Ura, illumine thou the darkness. His jawbones are to him, and Ra taketh up his position in Ament. Thy boat is to you, and is thy right. You are guided along, and those who convey you over the water, and who dwell in the earth, make calamities to come upon Apep, straightway on thy behalf. Your protector is the star god. You are praised and adored. Your soul passeth on. You go onward, and your body is equipped with power, and the regions are open to you. The regions are open to you. You are protected by the star god. References to the star god. Again, the symbol for the Duat is a 5-pointed star. So all these references to protection through the word and by these gods who rule the stars. And there are multiple images of the star gods, this one being one of my favorite. And the regions are open to you. Doors of the hidden land are open before you. Osiris comes to you. Osiris avenges you, and your word is Ma'at against your enemies. Now we have an allusion to the myth of Osiris. Osiris avenges you. So the myth wasn't explained at all, but it's alluded to in the first hour of the Duat. So this shows you that this information was a part of a nobility, or what we call the Pharaonic priesthood. And there was a mystery school that you had to attend for 40 years to be initiated as an Osiris or a priest, right? And so this shows you that even in the Sesh Am Duat, Ramesses VI, Ramesses IV, as well as Seti I, there's a clear continuation of the myth, even though it's not explained verbatim in every single document. You go to rest. You go to rest in Amenta, and you come into being in the form of Kepera in the east. This great God sends forth word to the gods who dwell in the Duat and those who inhabit earnest, saying, Open ye your hidden doors, so that the God may look upon you and may throw aside your darkness, that you may draw your water from earnest and your bread, and that wind may come to your nostrils, and that you may not be destroyed and overcome by your own foul odor, and that you may not be choked by your own dung, and that you may untie and cast away your swathings, and that you may lift up your legs and walk upon them, and that you may stretch out your arms, and that your souls may not be made to remove themselves from you. O you who live in your forms and who utter your words of magical power, who are provided with your swords, whereby you may hack in pieces the enemies of Osiris, whose seasons are permanent, whose years are well established, who pass your state of being in your hours, who dwell in your estates, who have barley in your bread cakes, who have loaves of bread made of the grain which is yours. All right, and so notice there's an allusion to barley and beer, and that's basically a reference to the maltose transport system, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Whose word is Ma'at? Depart from my boats and retreat before my images, that I may vivify anew this your field. My soul is among you who have done battle on my behalf, who have protected me against Apep, who have life through my soul, who have being through my bodies, who establish your seats of holiness, which have been decreed to you that you may exist therein, who are with your souls by day, who are in my following in the Duat, when I make my way through the night, and when I destroy the darkness. Oh, grant me your help, that I may travel on in the following of my eye, and that I may journey forwards with those who go to my place in the east. I avenge you, utter you cries of joy, for I order your destinies. When they have addressed this God while rowing along his boat, they cry out, and they bring him to rest in the field of the Nerpetier gods who are in the following of Osiris. If these seem to be done in writing, according to the similitudes which are in the hidden place of the palace, and if a man has knowledge of these words, they shall act as magical protectors of a man upon earth, regularly, unfailingly, and eternally. The name of this hour is Seshet Maket Nebes. All right, so there we start getting to the second hour. So I don't want to get into the second hour yet, but essentially we have entered into the Net Ra. We have been reborn over the Net Ra as Kepera, and now we are moving into a different region of the Duat. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to pause and do a little translation real quick. So 1 second. Let's scroll the page. I believe it's is it 290? No, it's actually 250, I believe. Okay. Let's see. I believe we have it. Here we go. All right. So we are translating the first hour. You guys should be able to see this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So we are looking at the first hour in the upper register, and this is the text of the 12-hour goddesses. Remember, we keep talking about the number 12, the 12 signs of the zodiac. You know what I'm saying? The 12 months of the year, the number 12, the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples. So all throughout the Hebrew and the New Testament Bible, we see a motif of the number 12. But that motif existed much prior to the creation of what we now call the Bible. So this is a translation from a German book, which I can't pronounce, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But if you want to obtain the original source material, it is titled Das Am Duat by Hornung. All right. And this is the reference to the translation. So it says here, Renu Inu Necher Wet Seshem Yewet Necher Ak. Names of the goddesses who guide the great God. So one thing to note here is it always starts with an open mouth, meaning that this is a spoken word. And also this word R can mean Ra in certain instances, and it can also mean something that is vocalized. And it also can indicate the beginning of a chapter. So all within this one mouth symbol, we can deduce so much. Now notice that the mouth is open and that it's on top of what looks like a water wave, meaning that when we speak into existence, we are vibrating, right? And that's what the spoken word is. It is the WORD, the earth, water, air, and fire becomes the word that is spoken. Then we have Renu, new, right, which is a vessel, Necher, right, which is the word that they translate as God or divinity. And this is plural because there's more than one. So it's really Necherit, right? And that's why it's the names of the goddesses. So Ren is name. If you put this, if you attach this to it, the U, that makes it plural. So Renu, and then Necherit, meaning goddesses. Let's continue. So that was from the tomb of Amenhotep II. Now let's read a version of this from the sarcophagus of Usur Ma'at Ra, Setepin Ra, which is Ramesses VI. So again, here we see Renu, but it's written a little differently. All right, Renu, we have a determinative of a man seated pointing to his mouth. Renu, Nu, Necherit, and this time we have a determinative of a serpent goddess with an egg. All right, so this is a determinative which lets us know that this Necherit is feminine. So we have Renu, Nu, Necherit, Ma'ak, Yoet, Necher, M Seketet. Now the Seketet or the Sektet, this is the night bark. And you can see here that it has the determinative for the boat, which lets you know what we're talking about. So even though the Sektet is clearly vocalized here, we still have the determinative of the bark, which lets us know that we're talking about the night bark. So the differences between these two, I would say, is that in the late period, it appears like they use more determinatives, right? The vocalization is the same, but the determinatives are more abundant in the late period compared to the time period of Amenhotep II. Now we're going to read a version from the first hour. Now this is the middle register. Again, this is still the text of the two Ma'at goddesses from the tomb of Tutmosis III. So his starts totally different than Usur Ma'at Ra and Amenhotep II. His starts like so. It says, Ma'ati Sechu Necher Pen M Sektet. The two Ma'at goddesses haul this god in the night bark. So we have a reference to the two goddesses, right? And also the city of the double gates, which we also mentioned. There's always a double, right? And this leads to what we now call in quantum physics, they talk about antimatter and how every particle has an antiparticle, or how every quark has an antiquark. And the Egyptians talked about this double thousands and thousands of years ago. So, yes, he doesn't start it off the same way that Usur Ma'at Ra and Amenhotep II start off their particular hours, but the theme is essentially maintained. There are two goddesses, in this case, Ma'at goddesses, that are hauling this god in the night bark. Then it goes on to say, Sekejet et eri et net nawit ten jeter iu. While sailing in this portal of this region, it is 120 iteru, which is a measurement. I believe it was translated by Hornung as cubit. Then it goes on to say, Apef mu emet ar ornis. Afterwards, he traverses water to Ernest. All right, so now he's arrived at the shore banks of Ernest in the first hour. And that's the translation again from Tutmosis III. So yes, his middle register is definitely more detailed. And then let's look at the closing text of Amenhotep II. So it says, Seshem tiu winuwet jemu u tek, the hour in which you are accompanies you. Sheta'u seti ke M Jeru K. So he put certain consonants in asterisks here. So I'm assuming maybe some of the text was missing. So this part isn't exact. There are some words missing, but we are able to still basically translate it because most of the words still remain. So it says here, your two daughters haul you in your visible forms. So now we're talking about the transformation of the spirit. And so the different forms, right, in the afterlife, the folding of the proteins determines what form is generated based upon the instructions of the DNA. Then it goes on to say, Hotep K M Wejiu Depiu Weteta, you rest in the stille upon the fields of the earth. Jetesh K Gere Jen Je Teke Heru, you take away the night and you bring the day. Iwet Necherpu Daj Wenu Wet, you are that God who traverses the hours. Hetep Ke Weja U Heper Rej Keperi, you rest in the bark of Kepera or Keperi. So let's just read all of it as 1 hour, and then we'll start the analysis of it. So yeah, let me go back here. Here we go. These are the names of the goddesses who properly lead the god in the night bark. While sailing in the portal of this region, it is 120 cubits. After he sails, he traverses water to Ernest. This is the hour in which he is. The 2 daughters haul you in your visible forms. You rest in the stille upon the fields of the earth. You take away the night. You bring the day. You are that Neter who traverses the hours. You rest in the bark of Keperi. So interestingly, we have sailed from the night bark to, we're now getting into the day and the bark of Kepera. Now, Kepera is a dung beetle. And let me see if I can zoom in on Kepper real quick. Do I have a glyph of Kepper? Let's break down Kepera. I don't think he has a glyph of Kepper on here, but Kepper is essentially the dung beetle. And what's interesting about the dung beetle, let me see if I could pull this up real quick. Something you guys may not be privy to. Dung beetles actually navigate through the Milky Way. So let me pull up this article from National Geographic, and I'll also drop the link to it so you can read it on your own when you have time, because I'm not going to read the entire article. Hey, Mrs. Murph, what's going on? Shout out to anybody watching in the chat, and shout out to everybody that will catch this on the replay. So the dung beetle navigates via the Milky Way, the first known animal in the animal kingdom. So a new study shows that dung beetles navigate via the Milky Way. They are the first known species to do so in the animal kingdom. The tiny insects can orient themselves to the bright stripe of light generated by our galaxy and move in a line relative to it, according to recent experiments in South Africa. And it goes on to say, scientists already knew that dung beetles can move in straight lines away from dung piles by detecting a symmetrical pattern of polarized light that appears around the sun. So literally, dung beetles use the polarized light from the sun to move away from the dung balls that they roll and create. We as human beings cannot see this pattern, but insects can, because they have special photoreceptors in their eyes. So the way that they see light is more advanced than the way that we see light as human beings. In addition to that, they also use visual cues at night. So the dung beetle is not just active during the day, it is also active during the night. And it also has really good night vision as well. And when they are doing this experiment, what they essentially did was they put hats on the dung beetles to block their ability to see stars. And so this is an example of one of those beetles. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see that there's a hat over the dung beetle, and that basically blocks his vision. Okay. So with the vision being blocked out, they're basically seeing what happens to the dung beetle if we block out their ability to see light. Are they still able to move? Are they still able to navigate? are they still able to basically survive without light? And this study proved that without the light, they were not able to perform to their highest level. Again, attracting the beetles proved straightforward. The scientists collected buckets of dung, put them out, and waited for the beetles to fly in. But their initial observations were puzzling. The dung beetle could still roll a ball in a straight line, even on moonless nights, which caused us a great deal of grief. We didn't know how to explain this at all. Then it occurred to us that maybe they were using the stars, and it turned out they were. To test the star theory, the team set up a small enclosed table on the game reserve. They placed beetles in them, and they observed how the insects reacted to different sky conditions. The team confirmed that even on clear, moonless nights, the beetles could still navigate their balls in a straight line. To show that the beetles were focusing on the Milky Way, the team moved the table into the Johannesburg Planetarium and found that the beetles could orient equally well under a full starlit sky as when only the Milky Way was present. So this is what we call creating independent and dependent variables in the scientific method, right? There's a control and there's a placebo. So essentially, the placebo was a full normal sky, and the control was with the Milky Way being the only thing in the sky. And lastly, they put little cardboard hats on the beetles' heads, as I just discussed, and this blocks their view of the sky. And when they did this, the dung beetles just rolled around and around and around aimlessly, according to the study. And this study is published in the journal Current Biology for anybody that wants to do the research. And so the study concluded that there is strong evidence for orientation by starlight in dung beetles. In addition, this discovery reveals another potential negative impact of light pollution, which is a global phenomenon that blocks out stars. So somebody said, what is the headline on that article? Let me show you the headline one more time. This headline is Dung Beetles Navigate via the Milky Way, first known in Animal Kingdom by the National Geographic. And this was published actually in 2013. So this isn't even new research. Technically, it's old. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that just to show the importance. Even insects depend upon the orientation of the stars. All right, so now that we discussed that, let's actually review the book a little bit. Again, all of this is contained as a full course, Medu Neter Level 3, Sesh Am Duat. The subtitle of this is Gliding to Eternity with 7 Proteins to Guide You. And our primary sources, let me actually make this full screen too. Dismiss that. Our primary sources for the research that we've been doing for the past couple of years were the ISIS Thesis by Judy K. King, which you see right here on the right, and also a book published by Alexandri Pankov called The Tomb of Ramesses VI, text translated with introductions and edited by Ron Bova. So by really taking the time to actually look at the funerary literature, we see a continuation of certain key ideas and key concepts. And one of those key concepts is this idea of transformation to a different form through the power of the word. And essentially, these are all allusions to DNA. And so this is the actual hieroglyphic introduction to the book in its original form, as found in the tomb of Pharaoh Seti I. And this roughly translates to the treatise of the hidden chamber, the positions of the Baas, the gods, the shadows, the Ak, and what is done. The beginning is the horn of the west, the gate of the western horizon. The end is thick darkness, the gate of the western horizon. in order to know the Ba of the Duat, the souls, to know what is done, to know their spiritualization for Ra, to know the secret Ba souls, to know what is in the hours and their gods, to know what he calls to them, to know the gates and the ways upon which the great God passes, to know the courses of the hours and their gods, to know the flourishing and the annihilated. So that's a very powerful introduction by Seti the first there, because this is just an overview of what the science basically unveils, right? He gives you a 30,000-foot overview of everything that is in this book, everything as far as the horn of the West, the gates of the West, what it ends up to in the end, the thick darkness, what is done with the hidden souls, what's in the hours, and to know what he calls them, to know these gates, to know the courses of their hours, and to know how to flourish in another form. And so, with all of that being said, I'm pointing out the comparison between the book of Revelation and the 12 hours of the Duat. So again, there are 12 gates or 12 hours of the Duat. There are also 12 goddesses in the first hour. Now we compare this to what we see in the book of Revelation. It says here, it, referring to New Jerusalem in heaven, had a great high wall with 12 gates and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. So when I read this book many, many times. I was once a Jehovah Witness. I always tell people that I was very much into the Bible growing up and the Jehovah Witness religion specifically. So I remember being very familiar with Revelation 21. But when I read this a second time, years later, it immediately reminded me of the Sesh Am Duat, because the Sesh Am Duat and also the Book of Gates has 12 gates that correspond to the 12 hours. And also, there's 12 angels at the gates. And what a coincidence that on the gates are written the names, just like there are names of the gods and goddesses that guard the gates in the book of Gates. In Revelation, it's saying that the gates are written of the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. Then it goes on to say, there were three gates on the east, three on the north, three on the south, and three on the west. This is talking about the 12 signs of the zodiac. The wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So again, we keep seeing this number 12. And if we look at this Kabbalistically, 21 backwards is 12, and it starts at verse 12. So it's literally Kabbalistically 12:12 in Revelation. Then it goes on to say, the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl. So this to me is reminding me of the crystallized state, what we call a time crystal, or the fifth state of matter is crystallized. It's a crystallized viral form. And at sub-zero temperatures, or what we call absolute zero, we see lots of crystallization going on, right? When we talk about the cold waters of the Duat, and we talk about the winding waterway, the cold waters, this is an allusion to that as well. And going forth, it ends with this. The great street of the city was of gold, as pure as transparent glass. So there's definitely some borrowing going on as far as tradition. Revelation was actually the last book added to the Bible. It was never originally a part of the original canon. And so all the imagery and the numerology and the Kabbalistics of Revelation is worth a video in itself, but let's move on. Right here, I'm showing you the first hour of the Duat. And again, this is from the sarcophagus chamber of the tomb of Pharaoh Amenhotep II, circa 1400 BC. New vocabulary. All right. Every video, I try to give some vocabulary because we try to connect the spoken dialects of Medu Neter that are still alive today, such as, the Akan tribes of West Africa. Also in the Congo, they speak a dialect of Medu Neter. And I go over this in the class where I show you a lot of people want you to think this is a dead language. So the new vocabulary word of the day is afu, which is a dead carcass. And so afu is composed of a flowering reed, a viper snake, and 3 pieces of flesh. And when you see threes like this in this particular glyph, that means plural. So to represent plurality, the Egyptians used the number 3. Again, this is prior to Christianity. The idea of the Trinity, or how God becomes 3, is all throughout the Egyptian mythology, way before Christianity. And these are just some of the names that I discovered during the research of this when I was really looking into different definitions for stars. And so here we have the Akim Sek, which is a star near the pole or the North Pole, or the polar star Polaris, which is a star that does not disappear till dawn, or what we call a never failing or imperishable star, which is a title of Ra, the never failing one. And then we also have another name of Osiris, Asar Ba'u Tef F, Osiris, the souls of his fathers. So again, this is pointing to how we are our ancestors. Their DNA is our DNA. And this is pointing to what I'm going to get into now, viruses. So there are good viruses, there are not so good viruses, and there are bad viruses. Just like there's good bacteria, there's not so good bacteria, and then we got the really ugly bacteria. So when you think about microbes and you think about that world we can't see with the eyeballs that we have, right? Because we don't have the photoreceptors that a dung beetle might have, right? We don't have the eyesight that a cat has, how cats have night vision, how hawks have the best vision of any bird in the sky. So compared to most animals, our eyes are much lower. So going on to say 8% of our genome is viral. 8%. So thousands and thousands and thousands of codons and words in your DNA code for viruses and bacteria. And so it goes on to say there are around 30 different kinds of human endogenous retroviruses in people today. And when you see that word endogenous, that just means it's already in your genes. Endogenous, in the genes. So we have about 30 viruses that we know of, and they're retroviruses, which is interesting because retroviruses write backwards. And so when we do the math on it, this amounts to about 60,000 proviruses in the human genome. 60,000 viruses. So this is concrete evidence and proof positive that humans have some ancient connection to viruses. And that's what this is alluding to. So I want to give you some education on one of these viruses that you have that you may not be aware of, but without this virus, you would not be alive today. Human endogenous retrovirus W, or HERB W, is a family of viruses that we all have. There are about 31 known families of HERVs, and these constitute approximately 8% of the human genome. And so this virus, HERB W, or syncytin, doesn't just appear in humans. Every single animal has its own endogenous retrovirus. Every single plant has its own endogenous retrovirus. And so they actually discovered HERV-W by accident because they were trying to figure out what was causing multiple sclerosis. It appeared that there was some sort of virus involved with the disease, but they weren't able to actually see it. So what they did was they took cell cultures of patients with multiple sclerosis, and they found these little virus-like particles with reverse transcriptase activity. Excuse me. And once they did this, they realized that the human genome and even the placenta itself is formed by a retroviral protein. So all animals that have placentas that carry children, they all start off in a viral form. And this virus is what actually binds the placenta to the uterine wall. Now we're going to talk about junk DNA just for a second. So 15% of our DNA, which they say is junk DNA, which is a misnomer, but most of our DNA is unordered, according to what we've now discovered. And 15% of that junk DNA is reverse transcriptase, which is again an enzyme that generates DNA from an RNA virus. So, why is it that most of our DNA isn't even human? Only 2 or 3% of our DNA actually makes us a flesh and blood living human being. The rest of it has some unknown purpose. And now, this was actually a really dope article that I found. Now, this also, I believe, was on National Geographic. And it stated that there are more viruses than stars in the universe. More than a quadrillion individual viruses exist on Earth. In other words, viruses are the most abundant living thing on our planet by far, and more numerous than the stars in the universe. So a quadrillion, or an estimated 10 nonillion, which is a 10 to the 31st power. So a 10 to the 31. So imagine 31 zeros after the number 10. That's how many viruses exist on our one little planet Earth. And this is enough to assign one, one virus to every star in the universe 100 million times over. So literally the most abundant form of nature in nature is virus and bacteria. Now, this was a video. Let me see if I can pull this video up real quick. Let me see. This is a video that I saw on the news not too long ago. Here we go. Let me stop sharing that for a second. Thank you guys for the super chats. I'm going to get to you guys in 1 second. Just trying to get through all the material. It's a lot of material to go through. So this is a video from CBS News. I'm going to drop the link to it so you guys can go watch it on the replay. But it showed that hundreds and hundreds of millions of viruses and bacteria fall from the sky every single day, and we just don't know it.
Time, scientists have quantified the number of viruses circling the Earth. Are you ready for this? University of British Columbia virologist Curtis Suttle, one of the senior authors of a paper in the International Society for Microbial Ecology journal, said, quote, every day, more than 800 million viruses are deposited per square meter above the planetary boundary layer. The bacteria and viruses are swept up in small particles from soil dust and sea spray before most of it returns to Earth in rain, and even more by Sahara desert storms blowing over North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Southern Europe. Matt.
All right, now notice that it said, let's go back. Every day, this is what's happening in the atmosphere. So when we look at the atmosphere, we got to shrink everything down to a quantum level. So when we shrink the Earth down, it's just a cell. That's all it is. And so it's saying every square meter above the planetary boundary layer, there's 800 million viruses deposited there and swept up from the Earth all the way up to the sky. So I never knew. This is something new to me. This is all new research to me. So I just never knew what was really going on in the atmosphere, what was really going on with bacteria and viruses. I had no idea. So now that we've discussed that, let's get back to this real quick. So we covered the fact that viruses circle the earth. So this is already a given. And actually, I want one more clip. I want to play one more clip, and then I'll wrap up my presentation because I want you guys to listen to the author of this book herself explain how the research came about. So yeah, let me fast forward to where she took this question. Let's go ahead and listen to this. This is Judy K. King. This is the woman that actually wrote the ISIS thesis. And this video is still on YouTube. Got about 47,000 views. So quite a lot of people are now researching this.
Shape us on a lot of different things. But I read something else too about something about what's on the dollar bill. It's a triangle, you know, with the lit up eye.
Yes, and I heard something about that too. And the eye is a big sign in ancient Egypt because
The crystal virus.
Mhm. It's, well, they call the Lambda genome has 2 arms, all right, and one arm is pretty much controlled by Goliath and the other arm by David. So it has these 2 arms, they call them eyes. So eyes of generation, I would say. But
That's the same as like the philosopher's stone and the diamond and the you know how the pharaohs went you know wanted to transmute and become a star.
yes,
That's all
yes,
the crystal virus.
yes.
Crystal skull of acid.
Yeah, it's all the
Crystal skull.
phage Lambda, right?
The stars, I think, and remember, if we shrunk the universe down to the quantum, scientists today are saying that the stars are DNA written across the skies. So those magnetic fields in our universe, and remember, Lambda has the 3 transition metals that can create a magnetic field. Lambda, or let's see, viral and bacterial particles would represent the universe of stars, and that represents DNA written across the stars. Once it is on the quantum level, because the quantum world is the real. It's projecting this large classical universe. So when you pass, you go back to the real quantum world of DNA and molecules, and back to the idea of the serpents and everything. A protein has helices, and it looks like serpents. It might have 3 or 4 of these circular serpentine legs, and as it folds, it goes through these different stages, and it works from helices until it becomes its functional state, where it's totally assembled at its native state. So serpents and snakes are a sign of protein activity and binding and folding.
You hear that? So serpents and snakes are not evil. They demonized the serpent. They said the serpent was evil, and the serpent was essentially the cause of the fall of man. And so we have the symbolism of the serpent, which has been demonized. So when people see serpents and snakes and cobras, they automatically think it's evil. But it's really a great metaphor for the afterlife cloning experiment, which is composed of proteins that have to fold. And basically, DNA provides the instructions for the protein. She said DNA is written across the stars. Yes. Yeah, I'll play that again so you guys can catch that.
Yeah, it's not addictive. So, but
Else too about the
is
dollar bill. It's a triangle, you
trying.
know, with the lit up eye.
Yes, and I heard something about that too. And the eye is a big sign in ancient Egypt because
The crystal virus.
Mhm. It's, well, they call the Lambda genome has 2 arms, all right, and one arm is pretty much controlled by Goliath and the other arm by David. So it has these 2 arms, they call them eyes. So eyes of generation, I would say. But
that's the same as like the philosopher's stone and the diamond and the you know how the pharaohs went you know wanted to transmute and become a star.
yes,
That's all
yes,
the crystal virus.
Yes.
Crystal skull.
Yeah, it's all the that phage Lambda, right?
the stars, I think, and remember, if we shrunk the universe down to the quantum, scientists today are saying that the stars are DNA written across the skies. So those magnetic fields in our universe, and remember, Lambda has the 3 transition metals that can create a magnetic field. Lambda, or let's see, viral and bacterial particles would represent the universe of stars, and that represents DNA written across the stars. Once it is on the quantum level, because the quantum world is the real. It's projecting this large classical universe. So when you pass, you go back to the real quantum world of DNA and molecules. And back to the idea of the serpents and everything. A protein has helices, and it looks like serpents. It might have 3 or 4 of these circular serpentine.
All right. So yeah, you guys just saw that. Now, as an aside, because this is a different class, but it's worth mentioning that there is a paper out on the astral origin of the emblems, zodiacal signs, and the Hebrew alphabet. So let me go ahead and give y'all the link to that. Because we talk about this in the Gnosticism. And this is actually the full PDF. So if you have this, you can literally go crazy with it. I'm going to be doing an audiobook on it. But essentially, this is the astral origin of the Hebrew alphabet. So if you are into the Hebrew Israelite philosophy, always question them about, you know, the astral origin of the Hebrew alphabet. Because in the Bible, it condemns people that use divination and the stars, but we have the clear evidence that the Hebrew language itself was an astral alphabet. So, for example, we are looking at the constellation of Orion right here. And by taking the angles of this particular Hebrew letter, it corresponds to the constellation of Orion. Another Hebrew letter corresponds to the belt of Orion. We have Canis Major, the Southern Cross, all the signs of the zodiac: Aries, Aquarius, Pisces, Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus. And it even references Pleiades in the Hebrew alphabet. So it goes beyond just the regular 12 signs of the zodiac. It goes further. So beyond just the traditional zodiac signs, it also refers to the bands of Pisces and the Southern Fish and the belt of Orion, Canis Major, and the Southern Cross. So yeah, this is really deep stuff. Now, what I want to highlight from this book, and I'm going to be, you know, breaking this down again when I go live later. Ancient Jewish and Arabian writers preserved the tradition that astronomy commenced in the family of Seth, right? Now, you don't hear a whole lot about Seth in the Hebrew tradition, do you? You don't hear anything about Seth at all. Actually, the only thing you really hear in the Hebrew tradition is information about Cain and Abel. But, you know, Adam and Eve did have a third son named Seth. So in the Gnostic Bible, Seth is essentially Christ, right? And it's basically, how do I put this? The chosen race of the Israelites is based on their lineage to Seth in the Hebrew tradition. So we're going to play just a little bit of the revelation or apocalypse of Adam, because he revealed this revelation only to his son Seth on his deathbed. He didn't reveal this revelation to Cain or Abel. So let me stop sharing that. And let me just thank you guys for your support real quick. Thank you so much, Mrs. Mirth, for the $20 super chat and the membership supporting the channel. Appreciate that so much. Also appreciate you, beautiful. She said that's what Mrs. Mirth said. I appreciate that. Sirius and Orion. Yep. Shout out to El Suit Typhon. And yeah, it's very interesting, right? So we're going to listen to a little bit of the revelation of Adam to Set. And then I'll conclude the presentation. Just give me a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap up. One. The Revelation of Adam from the Gnostic Bible, Gnostic texts of mystical wisdom from the ancient and medieval world, an audiobook by Shakim Ra, provided to the public by Amen-Ra University. The Revelation or Apocalypse of Adam is a mythic narration poem attributed to Adam, who communicated it to his son Seth. Composed as early as the 1st or 2nd century CE, this Jewish Gnostic apocalypse, with apparently no Christian element in or amended to it, is recognized as a transition stage from Jewish apocalypse to Gnostic apocalypse. In this apocalypse, Adam reveals to his son Seth a history of human creation before and after the fall, and a way to redemption through secret knowledge. The revelation occurs as a dream vision passed on by Adam in his 700th year and on his deathbed to Seth and his seed. It has the form of a historical testament. It moves from a period when Adam and his consort Eve were like eternal angels existing above the Creator God. Spiritual Eve imparted her knowledge of the eternal God to Adam, but that knowledge and the paradisal condition were lost when the demiurge took knowledge from them and instructed them only about dead things. Then, to wake Adam and Eve from dark ignorance and slavery, 3 persons, heavenly messengers, come to Adam and Eve and say, "Rise, Adam, from the sleep of death." They reveal to Adam hints of the great race that will come from the heavenly seed of Seth. Now, notice that the 3 angels reveal hints of the great race that will come from the heavenly seed of Seth. And shout out to El Sut Typhon, because Seth or Set is Adonai El or Sirius. And so that's new to me because I never knew Set could refer to Sirius, but I do know that at one point in time, Isis did also represent Sirius as well. So shout out to you. Now that we covered that, let's get back to the end of this presentation. I've been on here an hour and 11 minutes. Didn't mean to be on here this long. So I hope you guys do enjoy the replay. I try to keep them short because I know it's a lot of information. So back to the presentation. So we talked about the quantum world being real and the classical universe, or what we call material existence, being a projected illusion. And so what's really real is the quantum, the world of DNA and viruses. And as an aside, again, because I've done a lot of research into virology, and I've been really into plant virology lately. So when we look at plant viruses, they are often icosahedral heads, just like phage Lambda. And these are images of the heads of these viruses, and also these viruses in a spherical form. We have the cowpea mosaic virus, the cowpea chlorotic mottle virus, and the brome mosaic virus, and also the tobacco mosaic virus. So even plants and herbs and, different things that we plant, like fruits and vegetables, can be influenced and are influenced by viruses. So we're just giving a quick overview of the Sesh Am Duat, the book of what is in the other world, or also the metaphysical quantum world. It first appeared in the 18th dynasty, And thanks to modern research, we have complete versions of this book found in the tombs of Tutmosis III and Amenhotep II. And in addition, we have the first 11 divisions in the tomb of Seti I, 19th dynasty, and Ramesses VI, late 20th dynasty. So this tradition was preserved for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It was passed down through bloodline and through the priesthood. And so we've now been able to decipher it in terms of science, right? And not just as a book of what Egyptologists call magical spells and stuff like that. But we've actually correlated every deity in the Duat to a protein or to some biological function. And so the Egyptians, thousands of years ago, were using what we now call new science methods to distinguish different proteins by their shape or by their properties. So in the first hour, we mentioned the hidden chamber, right? And I'm going to show you some images of the A'at of Osiris, which is the domain of Osir. So these are different images of the Sekhet Hetepet, which is composed of the 14 regions. All right, so I'm just showing you different imagery here. And so going back to the domain of Osiris, certain books will say there's 14 A'ats to the domain of Osiris. Others will say 15. Now, what appears to be a contradiction is more so a thorough accounting of the different base pairs that have to be attached at that particular site. Now, this site, which we call the phage Lambda porin, is where recombination of DNA takes place. Interestingly enough, the Egyptian afterlife game of Senet, which is now formalized as chess, had 30 squares. Now, taking it a step further, the number 30 in Greek is lambda, and in Hebrew is lamed. So interesting, Greek lambda 30 and phage lambda's recombination site happens at the 30th base pair. Isn't that interesting? Taking it even further, we also have textual references to the house of the 30, coffin text 277 and 688. This is an image of the Nesmine papyrus, first hour of the Duat. So we have so many copies of this book from different time periods. But even if we don't have the complete book, let's say from one time period, we're able to preserve the entire book by going to a different time period. Now let's talk about the three-headed serpent, Duat hour 4. So this is the last scene of the 4th hour in the lower register of Tutmosis III. You can see here the goddess Ma'at is on the side, and you can see here that he is staring at a serpent with 3 heads. And above this serpent with 3 heads are 14 stars. And above that, we have some writing which we will decipher in a future video. But I wanted to show you this 3-headed serpent because this serpent represents crow repressor. And so crow repressor protein has 3 helices or coils, HTH, helix turn helix, and it is a DNA binding protein. Each subunit has 66 amino acids in length. So what a coincidence that this protein has 66 amino acids, because it says in Revelation that the mark of the beast is 666, which is carbon, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. And when it comes to this protein, it has 66 amino acids. Interesting. What a coincidence. Now, we also talk about the 14 discs, the 14 heads, and the 14 stars. And these stars also appear in the tomb of Ramesses VI. Now, let's talk about Apep, which is facing the solar bark. And remember, the mythology is the god has to slay Apep, essentially. So he has to cut off the head of Apep in order to traverse the journey of the netherworld. So this particular protein has 3 regular helices and 1 anti-parallel beta sheet, and it resembles a coil. And what it does is it represses 42 genes. And that number 42 is also sacred, and it will come up when we talk about the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at, what has also been called the 42 laws of Ma'at, or the 42 judges in the afterlife, while allowing the active Lambda CI repressor protein to bind to the DNA operator sequences to prevent lactose activity. So essentially, if this protein is activated, lactose activity stops in the cell. And lactose is very, very important. Now, this is Isis, which again represents lactose activated. And when lactose is activated in the cell, she slaughters Apep. And this is her cutting off his head. Now, isn't it interesting that Genesis says the serpent's head was bruised? Let me see if I can pull that up. Genesis 3:15. Now, this is after Eve has, partaken of the fruit and made the God of the Bible angry. And so he is basically saying, this is what's going to happen. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. So this is him saying that we will crush the head of the serpent in Genesis. Now, we go back, it is actually Isis or Heru that cuts off the serpent's head in the Am Duat. Now, let's talk about the metaphysics of the hour for a second. So there are 60 minutes in an hour, and this suggests 60 subunit proteins. Now, when a virus has 60 subunits, it displays perfect symmetry akin to the tree of life. Most viruses have an icosahedral capsid, which contains all the genetic material, and they generally fit 60 times n subunits into their capsids. The presence of Isis as Lady of the Boat, who occasionally wears the horizontal ram horns under her double crown, suggests the horizontal gene transfer of lactose into the cell. So this is what an icosahedron would look like if we laid it out all the way flat, right? Out of 3D into 1 dimension. And this is the head of many viruses. And also, we see this morphology reflected in the architecture of the pyramids and the temples. Going back to stars and viruses as seals, because remember, it talked about how you had to know the name of the guardians of these hours in order to pass through. So we see a similar tradition in the Hebrew, as far as the Kabbalah and the occult version of the Hebrew tradition. We have the Star of Remphan, which is an 8-pointed star associated with the Roman god Saturn and possibly Ishtar. We have the pentagram, which is a 5-pointed star, coming from the Hebrew pente, means 5, and Pentecost is 50 days. What a coincidence. Also, we have the Star of David, which is a 6-pointed star used in many ancient cultures for decorative purposes, rarely held religious significance until recent history. And on the right here, I have one of the seals of Solomon. So the seals of Solomon is a apocrypha of the Bible, which most people have not been exposed to. But in those different seals that Solomon uses, he uses this six-pointed star to seal the demons. Now, what a coincidence. Again, this number 64 is going to continue to come up repeatedly because DNA, a strand of DNA, if you will, has 64 codons. And for every codon, there are 6 groups of amino acids. The I Ching, which is the Book of Changes of ancient China, has 64 hexagrams, and each hexagram has 6 lines. So again, we see this universal message of how this binary code of DNA is all throughout history, whether we look at China, whether we look at the Hebrew tradition, or whether we look at ancient Egypt. So now we're going to conclude and just basically decode all the gods of our one. So the mummified bearded god wearing the white crown suggests the dormant phage Lambda Osiris. Goddess Sekhmet represents ultraviolet irradiation. When the cell experiences ultraviolet irradiation, it causes cell damage, and that triggers the cell to send a SOS response. And so, interestingly enough, cancer cells grow faster than normal cells because of their mutations. And we see in the example of Henrietta Lacks, that's why her cells were so valuable to modern science, because they needed to see if they could make a cell become immortal, but they needed a cell that wouldn't die, and her cells would not die. Next, the 3 serpents gliding before the boat containing the beetle, worshipped by 2 gods, suggests messenger RNA, ribosomal, and transfer RNAs. 42 deities of the upper and lower register, as we said before, correspond to the de-repressed genes and the repressed genes, which are activated when the virus infects the cell. The beetle points to bacterial transduction because we know beetles lay their eggs in feces. Okay, that's literally what they do. So the male has to roll a ball that's perfectly spherical, and he has to present it to the female. And if the female likes it, then she will agree to copulate with the male and lay her eggs into the dung ball. And essentially, the dung ball becomes the home of the beetle. The sun god speaks words, orders copies of the words, and speaks them to the gods. This points to the early transcription of the phage Lambda, being in control of the cell, directing the cell to create a new form or a new entity or a star-like being. And then the earth gates point to the double cell membrane of E. coli. So that is my presentation for today. Let me answer a few questions. You said that lady that was talking about the stars, you posted a link to that? Yeah, I did. Let me drop the link for it one more time. And I'll put a link to all of the videos, all the books, and everything will be in the description on the replay once this is over. So the link to that is dropped again. And if any, I usually don't open up the panel on these shows. I try to keep them quick. But next time I go live, if anybody wants to have a discussion or chime in or ask questions, I will drop the link. So, yeah, we appreciate everybody for coming to today's show. Carbon is melanin or dark matter. It is what we are made out of. Ashe. I agree. Appreciate that, Elsa Typhoon. And shout out to everybody that came through. I saw Knowledge, saw Hood Conservative, and I saw Keeping It Plain. All right, thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next one.